keeping you up to speed on all your Colorado teams. It's time for Coffee Break.
If there's one thing our fearless leader here in Broncos country, Sean Payton, loves to do, it's yap. And he is in the best possible environment for that to happen. The city that football-wise he helped build, New Orleans, the site of Super Bowl 59. And boy, was Sean making the rounds on Radio Row. So many thoughts I want to get into there. MPJ is on a heater the last couple of games, and it's raising questions for me about what exactly the ceiling is for a player heading into the back half of the first decade of his NBA career, and a player that's going to be a pivotal part of this organization if they want to continue another title run. And then I gave my thoughts yesterday on the Colorado Buffaloes for their 2025 season, now that we know who and when they will play all their games. But I want to get your thoughts. We talked to Jake Shapiro yesterday. It's been the buzz of the sports town here for the last couple of weeks, especially with Coach Prime's situation and everything rolling in. So I want to get your thoughts on what you think their record will be and how it maybe compares to mine. Maybe I'm crazy. You tell me. So I want you to load those in toward the back end of the show. But first, Sean Payton, man. He has not been one since he's really his entire career, but certainly not since he set foot in Denver to speak his mind and say what he thinks and think what he says. It started right out of the gate when one of his first comments here as the coach of the Denver Broncos was that Nathaniel Hackett, his predecessor, might have been one of the worst NFL head coaching stints in the history of the league, and just how poor everything was. He then wanted to kind of recant those. It was a double latte situation with Jarrett Bell, very respected reporter in the NFL circles. And then even just recently at the end of the year, when he was asking for superlatives and adjectives, he wanted audience participation to phone a friend for ways he could describe how bad it was with Russell Wilson last year. So he's certainly not been one to pull any punches and say what he feels. And that's not been the case thus far on Radio Row when he was with, who else? Kay Adams, who I think at this point we all owe a debt of gratitude to, the one and only Kay Adams, because she, more than any other show, any other host, any other talk format personality, she is able to pull information out of coaches, players, league personalities, whatever you want to know about. You sit that person in front of her and she gets more out of it than any of us. So I think we owe a debt of gratitude to Kay Adams, and I want to be the first to raise my hand and say that, because it's just whatever she seems to elicit with these players, they sit down, these coaches, they sit down in front of her and they just go gaga, and they say things that you would never hear them say at a podium press conference. And in this case with Sean Payton, he started off by saying the Denver Broncos are going to be a problem. And you know what? Some people have polarized opinions on that. There's some who say, yeah, okay, the Broncos overachieved in year one with Bo Nix. He was a sixth quarterback taken off the board. He was the least thought of quarterback in this class that was locked and loaded. Several prominent draft pundits said they had high second, late second round grades on him. So Sean Payton took a chance on this guy, called his shot. You know, he said that he and George Payton, you know, frankly, they think they're better at this than most other teams in the league, this being the pre-draft process and the evaluation prospect as they look to build a team in the offseason. And you know what? Early returns, point for Sean Payton on that regard, because Bo Nix, I think, has exceeded, even for a low bar, like the Broncos have had at the quarterback position since Peyton Manning left. He exceeded, Bo did, a lot of early expectations in year one. And some people think, okay, yeah, that's great, but let's not get high on our own supply. Let's not have too strong of an opinion of ourselves and start smelling our own salts to where all of a sudden we think because we had one year where we went in at 10-7 and we snuck into a wild card and then got boat raced by the Buffalo Bills, that suddenly, you know, we're bad boys on the block and everyone should be paying attention to us. I get that, but that's not how I look at it. I think it's good for a young team that is full of players who've never truly known winning to now have gotten this taste in their mouth. And there's a difference between getting high on your own supply and having confidence in yourself that is rooted in accomplishments that you've made. And I think that's where the Broncos are at. I'm okay with that. So I'm not going to give Sean too much pushback for getting cute with Kay Adams and be like, oh, we're going to be a problem here in Denver. Because you know what? I think they turned a lot of eyes externally among the national media, the fan base, and internally among their cohorts and fellow teams in the league. We saw Trent McDuffie get on a stage on Super Bowl Radio Row Media Day and say that one of the top 3 toughest receivers he finds to cover is Courtland Sutton, up there with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Probably not the answer I would have given, but you know what? That's a sign of mutual respect and admiration that I don't think somebody like a cornerback for the Kansas City Chiefs, and a good one in Trent McDuffie, gives to Courtland Sutton if the Denver Broncos aren't turning some heads. Travis Kelce, after the first game against the Chiefs, where they all but won it except for a botched field goal because Alex Forsythe didn't die slowly enough. Travis Kelce raving on his podcast with his brother that Bo Nix, that guy can ball. He can deal. The Travis Kelce is a Hall of Fame tight end, has a chance to go down as the greatest player to ever play his position in NFL history. And he plays for a division rival. So there's no reason that Travis Kelce needs to go out of his way to pump Bo Nix's tires or the Denver Broncos tires for any reason, but he did it, and it seemed genuine when it happened. So I don't think that that the Broncos players or Sean Payton, as their kind of vocal front face, having a little bit of confidence and saying, hey, no, we know we're capable of things and we're here and we're not going anywhere. They haven't crowned themselves yet, in my opinion. So I like confidence as long as it doesn't border into overconfidence, because at that point, it's just swagger. Sean Payton also delved into the positional needs for the Broncos with Kay Adams, where Kay kept trying to throw things at the wall and say, try to get in front of him and guess what they were. But it's all pretty basic. Her first lead was veteran wide receiver. And then you need a Reggie Bush, right? And then Sean Payton countered with the Joker role, which maybe brought tight end into the conversation. But I think what might have surprised other people, and it definitely made me raise my eyebrow, was the ordering of things in terms of the order of importance of positions to acquire this offseason. There's running back, tight end, wide receiver. I don't think I would put wide receiver first. For me, it would actually go in that order: running back, tight end, wide receiver. But the way that Sean Payton said it, and you always have to wonder how much gamesmanship is going on here. And Sean Payton, who will probably tell you that he's one of the smarter people in the room if you ask him, he certainly made it sound like they're really not as concerned at wide receiver as I might be, you might be, the collective fan base, or we, the local media, might be. He basically said, I think we're better off at wide receiver than people think. Just like he thinks they're a lot better at drafting and developing and evaluating talent, he and George, than people think. That's the exact same energy he gave when talking about the wide receiver. And I don't know that I'd go that far, if I'm being frank. Because listen, Courtland Sutton came off a 10-touchdown year in the final year with Russell Wilson, and followed that up with another fantastic year, 8 touchdowns, 1,000 yards, and was clearly there was a connected tissue there between Bo and Courtland. But I don't think Courtland Sutton is a bona fide wide receiver one when you look at a lot of teams around the NFL. And I think that the drop-off between what we saw with Courtland Sutton and then the secondary receiver options, pretty significant. Just like we saw that, the leading rusher in Javonte Williams for the Broncos was like not even a 500-yard rusher, or just barely so. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. That's kind of how it felt at number 2 wide receiver. It's like, boy, if Courtland Sutton had missed significant time and we would have had to have been relying on the inconsistent Troy Franklin, the unproven Devon Vele, Marvin Mims, who just felt like he was getting tossed all over the field and was kind of the Joker role by force, even if it wasn't a true fit. And then little Jordan Humphrey, Sean Payton's whoopee that's carried him throughout the majority of his coaching tenure, dating back to the Saints. We would have been sorely disappointed, and a lot of frustration bubbling at that point. So I think adding a wide receiver, either a veteran wide receiver at the number 2 slot alongside Courtland, because we're going to have to make some decisions about Courtland Sutton that I definitely want to get into next week as we officially turn the page on the NFL year. Or draft another young wide receiver, maybe an impact guy in the first round or second round that you think can maybe accelerate his development alongside the growth of Devon Vele, Marvin Mims, and Troy Franklin. You need more options there, because their offense was not dynamic enough from the skill position set to keep up with some of the better teams in the NFL. I think that became evident when they played tougher competition. So Sean didn't seem that concerned about it at all. I am a little bit. I don't think it's. I think you need an Ashton Genty, you need a Reggie Bush, to quote Kay Adams, and I think you could use a tight end more than a wide receiver. But I felt like that was maybe a little dismissive on the needs there. So overall, Sean Payton, he just does what Sean does, man. He's so funny in a sense that, like, he comes in and he talks about, the need for anonymous donors, right? Which in hindsight was clearly a shot at Russell Wilson with his PR team and his, staged photo shoots coming in and out of the building, practicing the high fives and the crowd walks and things like that. Clearly it was a shot at that we need more anonymous donors on this team. But man, nobody talks more than Sean. And I hate it because on that premise, I should be calling out some hypocrisy from Sean. But I just don't. And maybe I have to raise my hand with some admitted bias that I just like Sean Payton. So I don't do that. And he was a coach that I advocated for to bring in. But I'm going to go thus far to put a bow on the Broncos Sean Payton Media Radio Row experience. I am going to vote with a thumb up on the added swagger and confidence that I've seen from Sean and the comments and the ways that he talked about his team. More so than a negative reaction like it's gone too far. Because you know what? I think they earned a little bit of a bump with their performance this season. Speaking of performances this season, how about Michael Porter Jr.? Okay, this is a guy who started his NBA career in complete and utter uncertainty and turmoil. He was a prospective lottery pick candidate coming out of Mizzou, but he dealt with injuries through college. There was a lot of uncertainty on the medical front on whether or not he was going to be able to sustain any kind of true production or live up to that potential at the NBA level. Tim Connolly and company took a chance on him, drafted him much later than he would have been prospected to go. And they had the wherewithal and the foresight to be patient with him and bring him along slowly as he dealt with drop foot and back issues and all these kind of special circumstances that needed to be made. And it culminated with him being a key member of the core Nuggets 4 on a championship contending and winning team. Now, it's still kind of a curious case with Michael Porter Jr., in my opinion, because you see flashes from him with his size and skill set. He presents the same kind of physical mismatch that I think you would expect from a Kevin Durant. He's 6'10", and he can shoot the ball from almost anywhere on the court on a given night. It's always been a consistency thing with Michael Porter Jr., and that's what I think has been intriguing. And these last two games are a perfect microcosm of that. You look at his 2024-2025 season averages, he's just shy of 19 points a game, 6.5 rebounds, couple assists, and averaging about 2.5 to 3 made three-pointers per game. In his last two games, cumulatively, 75 points, 19 rebounds, 6 assists, and 12 three-pointers. So that's what? Quadrupling almost his points per game average and tripling his rebounds, tripling his assists, and putting a 4X, a big fat 4X on his average number of three-pointers made in a game. He looks like an NBA superstar in the last two games, setting career-high marks in the process and then following it up with a tie in the next game. So this is the kind of thing that gets pundits and critics of the Nuggets to wonder, why can't we get this guy all the time? I think it's a fair question. And I think the answer to the question, in my mind, you're free to disagree with me, and I encourage you to do so and chime in if that's the case, is I just think that Michael Porter Jr. is an inconsistent, streaky player. This is just who he is. He's been in the league for 6, going on 7 years. Okay. And I know that there were injuries and things that hindered some of that at the start. So it's not like he's been playing 82 games a year for 6, going on 7 years. But I think when you're 7 years into the league, to a certain degree, you kind of are what you are. Right. And and he doesn't even have the excuse that like a Russell Westbrook maybe has, or other players that have come in. Michael Porter Jr. has spent his entire career alongside the greatest player in basketball in Nikola Jokic. So it's not like we're seeing a situation where MPJ was underserved on a team like Aaron Gordon, or maybe was overextended so much, and then he comes and he fits a role alongside Jokic, and all of a sudden he just flourishes. Michael Porter Jr. has had that from the jump. So like Russell Westbrook, who in my opinion is playing some of the best basketball on the veteran end of his career that we've ever seen. Well, that's because he's playing alongside the Joker, where he didn't have in his previous 5 stops in as many seasons. So with MPJ, I think that we just have to be comfortable with this is who he is. And you're not going to get that level of explosive of a player every night. And so the ceiling for Michael Porter Jr., in a roundabout way, even though you're always trying to get better, this may be it. He may be at or near the ceiling of who he is as an NBA player. So if he's 6'10", he might be standing in a 7 foot or 7'1" room, maybe not crashing against it, because there's always things I think you can do to tweak and improve. But I don't think Michael Porter Jr. is, as far as the ceiling goes, is standing in a vaulted cathedral. Okay. And you need to accept that. We need to accept that in our evaluation of him. So if you take that as fact, just in our hypothetical world that we're living in, and you say, you know what, if this is who MPJ is, I'm good with it because I've seen this level of player that he is, factoring in that he had a little bit of a disappearing act at times in the NBA Finals when they went on to win the title. I've seen it work on a title team, therefore I'm okay with it of who he is as a supplementary piece. He just maybe can't be your number 2 guy, or in some cases, maybe not your number 3 guy. Then that's fine. Or you have to look at that and say, you know what? For a player who is paid on a max level deal right out of the gate early in his career and is going to be due for another one, I don't think that's the best sense of investment. And therefore the Nuggets should look to trade him or move on from him. That's fine if you can take that stance. Whatever side you land on is great. What you can't do is say, you know what? I want to pay MPJ because I still think there's a lot left to chase, because I think that you're setting yourself up for disappointment and failure there. So I think I lean more toward I'm okay with who MPJ is as a player now. And I'm okay with paying him at that level because I've seen it work on a championship contending team. But his spot and his presence on the team is predicated on the other players, a la Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, and Nikola Jokic, playing at or potentially even slightly exceeding their current performance value to compensate for that. And I think that by admission, that means that I think I'm more confident in Jamal, who is already the greatest statistical playoff riser in NFL history in terms of his bar of production at the regular season and the bar of production in the postseason. I think I am going to have more confidence in Jamal to return to that level of form as he evolved from playoff Jamal to bubble Jamal to champion Jamal, or whatever series of T-shirts we went through there with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, who won the MVP after having one of the greatest statistical seasons of all time in NBA history, and then has had 4 or 5 consecutive statistical seasons where he somehow elevated that bar. I guess I'm just banking on that and saying, you know what, if this is the best I'm going to get from MPJ, I'll take it. Love to hear your thoughts. Keep chiming them in. In the meantime, I teased it at the start of the show as it relates to the Colorado Buffaloes. I think we need to have a candid conversation about Colorado. And I think it's a tricky one at times to navigate, because this was a team that 2 or 3 years ago was legitimately considered one of the worst Power 5 programs in college football. They were a 1-win team going nowhere at a very fast rate. And then Coach Prime comes in and that narrative completely flips on its head, to a degree where, with all the expectation, the hype, the transfer portal influx of players, they were in a situation where they quadrupled their win total in a single year with 80-something new, just shy of 90 new players on a roster. And a lot of people, myself maybe even included, were sitting there thinking, that's kind of a disappointment, actually, And then they go into the second year and it's like, okay, yeah, that was cute last year, 4 wins or whatever. It's college football playoff time. And they go from 1 wins to 4 wins to 9 wins. And there's still a lot of us saying, you know what? They blew it. They had the runway lights were on to the expanded college football playoff, the inaugural 12-team run. And the Buffs just blew a tire on the runway. There was no room for takeoff. And you know what? I fell in that camp. I didn't fall into it the first time. Second year, I was on board with that. And now you lose Travis Hunter, the Heisman Trophy winner, one of the most unique, dynamic players we've seen in college football in recent memory. And you lose a starting quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, who was voted the best upperclassman quarterback in college football, which, again, you have to separate best quarterback in college football with best upperclassman quarterback. And I can't help but think there's some feelings being saved there from somebody somewhere along the line. But he was voted the best upperclassman quarterback in the nation, was a Heisman Trophy intrigue candidate for a while before Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty kind of ran away with it. And I don't think the loss of those two players alongside Jimmy Horn and other players on offense, I don't think that can be understated. And I know that they've got Caden Salter and Julian Lewis coming in. It looks like Caden Salter is going to kind of be the guy off the start, and Julian Lewis kind of the highly touted, highly prospective player waiting in the wings, but a guy who's also like reclassified and is 17, 18 years old right now. And that's just a lot to bear for a kid at that age. I think we need to be prepared to brace for a step back from the Colorado Buffaloes, not forward. That's why I laid out my expectation for them as a 7-5 or 8-4 team. And I think there's some subject to debate about what maybe the swing game could be between those two games. I pinpointed Arizona State as an early team for that because they play them on the back half of their schedule in late September. That was a team that was in the inaugural 12-team college football playoff and gave a good run until things just kind of got out of hand. They're losing Cam Scatabo, one of the best running backs in the nation, kind of outshadowed only by maybe Ashton Jeanty, Devin Neal, and a couple others who are in that conversation below Jeanty. And so how big of a step back does Arizona State take? They still have a competent player at quarterback. They've got offensive skill players that I think are still ready to make impacts. They're not losing, in my opinion, as much as the Colorado Buffaloes. So that could be a swing game for me. There are others. So I don't think that's a bad thing, though. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that if we go into this Colorado Buffalo season with Caden Salter coming out of Liberty and they win 7 or 8 games and they go to a bowl, and yeah, they're not participating in the college football playoff, they're probably not a contender a serious contender for the Big 12, although we saw Arizona State, who was picked to be one of the last teams to finish in the Big 12 conference, and then they rocket their way to the college football playoff with a bye. So nothing's impossible, but I think we need to be bracing ourselves from a realistic standpoint early on to say, hey, they won 9 games last year and they caught a handful of breaks along that path. They didn't have to put 2 of the top 3 teams that were tied for them at the top of the Big 12 standings right there at the end of the year. They didn't have to play them last year, so they avoided a lot of those tense tiebreaker situations. That's not going to be the case this year. And I think some of those Big 12 teams are returning a little bit more at key positions than Colorado is. So I'm going to put it on record right now in early February. I am okay with a 7 or 8 win season for the Colorado Buffaloes, and I will not be crying foul and disappointment like I started to do a little bit with their 9-win season last year because of what I felt they had laid out in front of them. I appreciate you all for hanging out with us today. We are 1 day away from the final Friday before the Super Bowl. So much to get into, so much going on as it relates to the NBA world with the trade deadline later today, the NHL with the trade deadline about a month away, and a lot of moving and shaking and potential speculation about where things could go and pick up pace over the next couple of weeks there. And the NFL never sleeps. And so after this weekend, we will really start to see the calendar turn for the Denver Broncos and how much opportunity they have in front of them in what I believe to be one of the best and most fun and intriguing off seasons that this team has had in at least a decade or so. We'll see you all same time, same place tomorrow.